Sex work is not work, and here's a quick rundown as to why. It is a form of slavery. Consent can't be bought. The majority of prostituted women want to exit. Poor women and girls of color are disproportionately funneled into the sex industry, which relies on there being a vulnerable and uncared for class of women and girls to sexually exploit. Racism, classism, imperialism, slavery, and colonialism are all embedded in or connected to prostitution. Prostitution is a cause and result of inequality between the sexes and has been proven to rely heavily on trafficking and exploitation. It promotes violence against women. It is violence against women, as prostitution is inherently violent. The sex industry encourages, promotes, and caters to male sexual entitlement. Under full decriminalization and legalization, prostituted women are still murdered, raped, assaulted, and stolen from by pimps and johns. Women who have escaped from prostitution have high rates of PTSD and other disorders. The industry promotes fetishization, stereotypes, and sexualized racism and racialized sexism against women of color and other minorities. Consensual sex work and human trafficking are inescapably linked. In short, the liberation of women in an industry dedicated to the objectification of women cannot coexist, as it reduces women to sexual objects and masturbatory aids, preys on the most marginalized women and girls, creates a porn culture that harms women and girls, yes, even feminist porn, and the normalization of sex as work degrades the status of women as a class. Of course, this doesn't prevent some women and men from claiming that sex work is empowering. I think that this stems from the misunderstanding of what empowerment actually is. Empowerment is authority or power given to someone to do something, or the process of becoming stronger and more confident, especially in controlling one's life and claiming one's rights. Sex work, prostitution, it's the opposite of empowering. Objectifying yourself does not give you political power. What it does do is give you social approval, along with a host of mental health issues like higher depression, anxiety, and dissociation. So why do people support sex work so avidly? Quite simply, it feels good to be wanted, and it doesn't help that a whole generation has been groomed into thinking that sex work is without consequences, both in their own personal lives and to themselves. OnlyFans, for example, has brought selling adult content to the mainstream and advertises itself as a risk-free, get-rich-quick scheme, with stories of the healthcare worker who now makes 1.5 times his annual salary in a month, or the ex-teacher who earned $1 million. However, for the most, average earnings are only $180 a month, with the most successful accounts run by porn stars, influencers, and celebrities. After all, they pay rich women to do it, so you'll do it for free. While a superstar might be able to make enough that they are able to afford security and to remain safe after trying out OnlyFans, the average woman will not. The supply is much greater than the demand, which not only brings down the average cost of the product, but also causes users to promote their OnlyFans everywhere they can, including on their personal social media. This decimates any chance at anonymity, and there are plenty of examples of women being outed as sex workers, fired, or even having their children kicked out of school as a result, as well as being stalked, harassed, hacked, and asked to engage in behaviors that make them feel uncomfortable, like choking. Sex workers and prostitutes should not be treated any different because of how they make their money, but as it stands, they are. No matter how much Twitter might try to argue otherwise, women who engage in sex work often do so due to an influence of self-objectification, and are still treated badly because of the inherent objectification that comes with being sexualized. Previous research finds that both men and women perceive sexualized women as lacking in certain human qualities such as mental capacity and moral status. We find that women perceived as more open to casual sex are attributed less mental capacity and less moral status. We also find that participants tend to associate attractiveness with greater mental and moral status in women, but we find only limited evidence that perceived age influences objectification. Our findings suggest that although positive attractiveness biases may mitigate the amount a woman is objectified, greater female objectification may be prompted by observers' negative stereotypes of promiscuous women. For trans women, this concept is even more complicated. In short, many trans women are actually autogynephiles who find sexual satisfaction in being perceived as or acting as a woman. There are several different types, including transvestic, behavioral, anatomic, and physiologic. Research by Ray Blanchard, created through the 1980s to 90s and continued today, helped to formulate a psychological typology of gender dysphoria, transsexualism, and fetishistic transvestism, which addresses many aspects of the trans community that many choose to overlook. Gender euphoria often coexists or is defined by a resulting erection. Often, trans women equate being treated in a degrading or misogynistic way with gender euphoria, or even go so far as to equate womanhood with sexual degradation, illustrating a link between misogyny and the trans movement. But of course, I don't expect you to just take me by my word. From the writings and research of liberal feminists and trans allies, down to the words of trans women themselves, you can find proof of the equation of misogyny and furthermore the misogynistic treatment of prostitutes as gender validation. Bodies and Desires on the Internet, an approach to trans women sex workers' websites, a research article by intersectional feminist Julieta Vardabedian, reads, "This article understands sex work as an empowering activity which allows trans women not only to earn money, but to develop self-confidence and experience pleasure. For many trans women, prostitution is the main and only place where they can be admired and desired in a social environment that otherwise enables great discrimination and structural violence against them. They present themselves as good lovers who are able to perform viral sexual practices, but at the same time, their beautiful and feminine bodies are of great importance." Transgender Sex Work and Society by Larry Nutbrock reads, "Being admired and desired by male clients may serve as a powerful affirmation of their femininity." Queer Sex Work by Mary Lang, Katie Pilcher, and Nicola Smith reads, "By performing female glamour, these trans women garnered psychological and social validation for their desirability to men who appreciated and paid for their beauty, time, and skills. Going into work every day all dolled up, said Jamie Lee, brought immeasurable gender affirmation and healing." Often the argument is that trans people resort to prostitution because they have no other options due to discrimination, but it's become evident that many turn to prostitution because of the validation it offers them. One can also look at the types of battles that trans people tend to center around. You will hardly hear about actual solutions to prostitution, but instead most trans rights activists are too busy arguing over the inherent bigotry of having genital preferences, or actually being homosexual, or about not having good enough representation in their favorite cartoons. You can check out my previous video on what trans people want for a more in-depth discussion on the topic. It's really sad because I do want trans prostitutes to have other options and to have safe, fulfilling professions. However, self-objectification is such a strong force that it is difficult to break the belief that sex work is empowering or even harmless. Underneath the veneer of desire and support, selling yourself as a product can only lead to being treated as subhuman. As always, we should serve to answer, who benefits? And in this case, it's easy enough to see. The benefactors of the women who self-objectify themselves, either fall for the lie of sex work or are trafficked into it, benefit from the creation of a continual and relatively willing supply of sex. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I do intend to go further into the history of porn and how objectification really plays into that. But for now, I just wanted to go over a quick review of why sex work is bad and how objectification plays into that. It is a very interesting subject because even those who are on the opposite side who believe that sex work is empowering have to admit that there is a problem with sex work and that it's not inherently a good thing just because people choose it. It all circles back to choice feminism in a sense, and then of course there's also the gender side of it. I've seen it's just so wrapped around gender ideology that like there was a case of a gender clinic telling patients to consider sex work to pay for their transition. I think we need to walk it back into where we are making people who buy sex be the ones who get criticized and treated as lesser, because they are. You should not be buying sex from someone because that is a rape. It's that simple. Anyhow, this is where I have to let you go. I should be working on studying, but you know me. I'm really great at procrastination. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.